employ if you're not even offering just wages, you see.
Mm-hmm.
So the causes of unions would be fulfilled, readily fulfilled, because you're not going to employ people for a fraction because they're starving for jobs. You're depriving them of but a fraction of a just wage. The guy says, heck with you. If it weren't for me working in this shop, this contract for this high-tech guy, would never even be filled. I'm the only one who can produce this product to these specs. You lose the job that's the gravy of this shop unless you pay me right, and I only want my fair share. I've been through all that in life. I've seen how all this stuff works. And mathematically perfected economy is a resolution of all these issues.
Sorry, Mike. I have people sending messages in left, right, and centre here trying to keep track of them all.
Cool.
See if there's anything important. But so far, no.
Ah, too bad. You would think somebody might have an important question.
See, that's the problem. You've pretty much answered everything.
Mm-hmm.
You've covered every angle of it. So I think people are just trying to wrap their heads around this whole concept now and trying to, settle into it. And
well, I suppose the only thing I might further cover is my work is the original impetus of the idea now that interest is unjustified. But of all my plagiarists, you won't even find anyone who can articulate it as I do to this day. And there are a number of things that I've done through time which the imitators have taken as indicating glorious alternate possibilities of solutions. One of these is spending or gifting money into circulation. So I might just quickly discuss that as a particular example of a fact that it's not a solution. I wrote a paper in 1975, which I titled Parable of Perfect Economy, and it's basically an example of a fictitious example of colonial economy in which Benjamin Franklin explains how to fund government even without taxation. It's a really phenomenally inspiring piece to read. Literally 25 million web pages today plagiarize that paper without any tribute at all to the author, not even realizing that it's a story. It's not a historical account. In this story, the words of Mike Montagne are merely issued through the fictional mouth of Benjamin Franklin. The event never even happened. So anyway, and this is one way that I, have distinguished my plagiarists. Jacques Jaquerin was one of the first to plagiarize that paper in a major way, and of course he began his very first page of his debt virus with the plagiarism of it. And he'd called me and written me before he did so, a year before he published his book, as a matter of fact, because my work was evidently the very inspiration for his work, and yet he reported that event as if it was an historic account. And so he proved in the very first page of his book that he was plagiarizing my whole thesis of inevitable failure, which is what he renamed a debt virus. But you see these terms, debt virus, or in the case of Ellen Hodgson Brown, Ponzi scheme. These things are things that we don't understand a damn thing by. No one can explain to me how to solve our problems, or even what our problems are, from the definition of a Ponzi scheme. It doesn't happen. Well, so it is with all these people. Ellen Hodgson Brown, for instance, she was arguing that against me in online, debates we had at Op-Ed News, for instance, that interest wasn't even the problem. Well, finally she got that down, although she's just pretending to be a monetary authority, and she is a raw and pathetic neophyte at best. But the video that everyone's familiar with, "Money is Dead," and Bill Still's work, and so on and so forth, are pathetic plagiarisms of my work. The thing that's wrong with this idea of that money as debt is the problem. You see, debt isn't the issue. And in fact, a promissory obligation isn't really a debt. It's a contractual commitment to pay for consumption of others' property as you consume of it, and to possess it while you're doing so generally. So uh, uh, the thing that's wrong with spending money into debt, which is not even these plagiarists' original idea, it comes from my parable of perfect economy, where I explained how Lincoln funded the Civil War, and I explained how to fund government without even any taxation through the fictional mouth of Benjamin Franklin. It's really funny if you think about it. That so many people have taken this idea, which I planted as a fault in my original story, and I would give a presentation of my parable of perfect economy before a live audience, and at the end of the presentation, I actually literally had people weep when I would tell this story, because they would understand what a crime against us all this is. And they would realize what a glorious solution Benjamin Franklin had explained. Which, of course, were my words issued, an explanation, an invention even, issued through the fictional mouth of Benjamin Franklin. And so, at the end of this story, I'd have this audience in a state of shock. Utter shock that they could be paying for a house at $9 a month, that and when it's paid for once, it's paid for forever, that government could be funded with no taxation whatsoever. They were in shock. And I just left them like that. I'd stand before them for moments and moments and moments, seeming forever. And finally, I had to apprise them that I wasn't finished. I would say, "Now what was wrong with this story?" And they'd look at each other. They'd wake up. It was like, holy criminy, how could anything be wrong with that? And I would explain then that merely spending money into circulation had a number of faults. Number one, it was inflationary. That rightly, whoever consumed of the government service or infrastructure needed to pay for it according to their consumption of it, as we do in promissory obligations. The government's obligation was no different than ours. That the two parts of this story, where I explained first how promissory obligations work in mathematically perfected economy, and in the second part where I showed how to fund government without even taxation, that they were two disparate examples, and that you had to pay the money out of circulation, and the right people to do that were whoever consumed of the government service or infrastructure or whatever. The other thing that's an offense against us is that means if you did things that way, that the size of the state has to be equivalent to the money that you need into circulation. So the size of government has to grow accordingly, and of course that has its costs, you see, which are totally undesirable. If you need to build, $100,000 homes in this community, and build 3 bridges across the river, and pave all these roads, and put all these, sewer and water and electric systems and internet access and all this stuff in, well, the government's got to grow that big if you're spending the money into circulation. That would be preposterous if you think about it, and totally undesirable, because the object of government, the least government governs best. You see? So we eliminate all this, allow all that money to come into circulation according to public whim. If I want to build all that stuff as a developer or whatever, I just issue a promissory obligation for my cost. But of course, my ability to pay has got to be certified, as it would be through this common monetary foundry. So the money comes into circulation to sustain further production which is justifiable and which we intend to reap in our lives. Well, here's the problem if you just spend money into circulation then. Somebody needs to build a $100,000 house for our newlywed couple that might want to own a brand new $100,000 house. And let's just go back to the linear rates of depreciation for a minute at $83.33 a month. They readily qualify to pay for that house over the course of their lifetime. Well, if we just spend money into circulation from government, how do they get it? They have to work their entire lives until they save the $100,000 and can buy the house then. But the $100,000 doesn't even exist in circulation that the contractor could build it. And he likewise has to do the same thing. So by denying us our right to issue promissory obligations, you minimize the extent to which we can prosper according to the fruit of our own doings. In other words, deny us our vital right to issue promissory obligations, and that newlywed couple would instead be forced to save its entire life from a circulation which is meant to represent something else, therefore denying that much commerce that we could sustain otherwise, while they save it and sock this money away. All the while, of course, because they can't own a home, they're subject to exploitation by, slumlords or whatever, And so they may, if they're fortunate, to survive all that, have enough to own that home finally in the end of their lives instead. It's wrong, 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 wrong. Because at the end of their life, they've still paid for it, you see? So why not allow them to pay for it across their entire lives, which allows them to get into the home immediately, further provides the market to the construction contractor that produces the house. Everybody's happy. He earns more because he builds more houses during his lifetime, delivers them to the people that, need and want them and can pay for them. Simple as that. All handled by software through a common monetary foundry.
And how long would it take for such a software to be written up?
Well, I've written such software myself. One-man projects, 80,000 lines of finished code, handled far more than a common monetary foundry has to do that. You're basically taking banking software and automating a process of approving quote loans unquote, which is issuance of promissory obligations, is the proper expression for what's going on, because remember, these were falsified debts. We could adopt it in a matter of weeks from existing software. We need a data center, and of course the rightful place to do these things is government, and that's another reason this mandate has to compel government to do this. And of course we're actually declaring all officers of government null and void. We're divorcing ourselves from every government that fails to meet our deadline of establishing mathematically perfected economy, which means we have to write the software, create the data center. Of course, data centers exist all across the world. The trouble is there's people who've wanted to finance this for a fraction of the GDP of a country and so on and so forth, and that's all wrong because profit has to be taken out of it. So that's one reason that hasn't happened even on an international level already. But the right thing to do is to do it through government, and we're giving government one chance to concede to our demands, and otherwise they have to step aside. So it would be a matter of weeks to produce the software. Someone could come up with it, say, well, I've got it. I even knew a fellow, an elder gentleman, who'd written all the software for several different owners of whole banking systems himself. You know, and I mean it was early archaic stuff still, Fortran, all character-based interfaces and that kind of stuff. But still, it was running on IBMs and sophisticated database technology and falsely supported